Hello everybody and welcome back to Back Out of the Case. This is Skyflight44, aka Zek44, and today I'm going to continue playing The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers on the Game Boy Advance. I've had a little bit of an audio fuck up when it came to my original recording of this, and I probably shouldn't have did a save state in between the videos until I checked the audio. That bit me in the ass because now I have to do post-commentary. Everything that I did that day, before this, I basically had no problems. So I didn't necessarily need to check this because I've already checked everything else when it came to my headset options and settings and all that. Then this happened and it just bit me right in the ass. Before I get on to some of the topics I want to talk about that aren't necessarily bound by this game, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the nice points about this game. Now I'm going to talk about the entire Game Boy Advance Lord of the Rings games later, but if you've seen the Fellowship of the Ring on the Game Boy Advance, it's either the worst Lord of the Rings game or it's the Fellowship of the Ring on the console. The console version sucks, but then again, the console version I think is a lot more fun if you can get past the actual glitches and some of the bad game design. Fellowship of the Ring on the Game Boy Advance isn't fun at all, is much more nightmarish when it comes to what am I supposed to do. And the only time I've ever been in combat was when I actually played somebody else's profile, somebody else's save file, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do. It looked absolutely awful. So when The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers on the Game Boy Advance came out, it was a completely different genre, and it was pretty good installment. It was really actually nice. Granted, I still think The Return of the King is much better. It's much more refined. Some of these, especially when it comes to the skill points, I don't like how this game actually did this, and I preferred how the The Return of the King did it. And after, we got a better actual game, but this game is just freaking beautiful in my mind. Just as a Game Boy Advance game, it's incredibly colorful. It really does try and get at least the look of the Peter Jackson films, the environments and such. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. Not to mention the music, in my opinion, does this game. A lot of the music on the Game Boy Advance I don't really like. I don't like the Game Boy Advance's sound at all. A lot of the music just didn't really do it for me. Whether it's remakes or ports such as Final Fantasy VI, Super Mario World, and shit like that. Music, not as good. Games like Sonic Advance or Metroid Zero Mission, didn't really care too much for the actual music. Pokemon, a series in which I really liked the music up until, the third generation, really didn't do it for me on the Game Boy Advance. You think something like this wouldn't really work all that well on the Game Boy Advance, but a lot of the actual Lord of the Rings games have great music, have absolutely great music. The soundtracks for the Lord of the Rings movies, the Peter Jackson movies, are incredible. I still find to be some of my favorite music soundtracks of all time. And, well, I still listen to them. I still listen to them while I'm writing, because it puts out a good mood for all the type of writing I like to Right. But the Two Towers has excellent. Granted, I think the Third Age probably does a lot of the best, in my opinion. But the Two Towers and the Return of the King both take that music and put it onto a Game Boy and doesn't make it suck. Doesn't make it, you know, not memorable. Some of the shit really is good. Granted, I think at some point they should probably stop, or they did eventually, you know, stop reusing the Lord of the Rings film's soundtrack. But when it came to like Battle for Middle-earth 2, Rise of the Witch King, at that point I was just wondering, when are they going to stop using that soundtrack and start trying to make new good pieces? Because that's something that I would have liked a bit earlier, if there's, at least if there was some attempts on some good music. Because I've been playing these games since the Two Towers on the console. Sorry, I had to sneeze there. Allergies and all. But I've been playing these games since the Two Towers came out on the console. A little bit later after the Two Towers. But I've played the Two Towers, Game Boy Advance, console. I played the Return of the King console, Game Boy Advance. I went and played the Third Age console, Game Boy Advance. I played the Fellowship of the Ring afterwards, Game Boy Advance and console, even though I knew both were shit. I played Tactics, eventually. I played Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2 and Rise of the Witch King as a child. A lot of these games, you know, these games just continue to reuse the music and, well, not the Fellowship of the Ring, but I was wondering if they were ever going to make attempts at new music. It's kind of like some of those Star Wars games, but at least, you know, if I remember correctly, there were definitely new music and some of the actual games. I mean, you know, it's easy. Then you don't really need to do too much or put too much work into the music budget because you already have it already done for you. But oh well. I played a bit too many of these games as a child. Oh, great. I to be honest, if I wanted to bring up the series I played the most amount of entries in as a child, it probably would be the Lord of the Rings video game series. Just because I played, if you include Battle for Middle-earth 2, Rise of the Witch King as a separate game, which I think you can, just because of how it feels, and you know, it does actually have its own campaign. But if you do include that, I would have played in my childhood probably around 13 actual Lord of the Rings games. All the ones I've mentioned outside of Tactics, the Lord of the Rings online game, and I also did have some amount of exposure to the SNES game, which I wish I wasn't necessarily exposed to. I much prefer the games I have now. But these are the Uruk-hai. As you noticed, my health went down quite a bit there. You're going to notice, especially with those freaking red dudes, those horrible actual recallers. These guys they're not going to go easy. They're going to take off health. They're going to beat you down. And the thing about it is, if you don't have good accuracy, you're not going to be hitting these motherfuckers. That's one of the big things. If you don't have good accuracy, well, I really can't say. I can't give you any more advice other than put some more, just put more points into your accuracy, because by Helm's Deep, they're going to be stronger. And you don't want to be giving out points to everything. Some of them you can go and skip. Some of the actual, what was it called? Some of the stats, you don't really have to go put too much in. Your accuracy is going to be the big one. Defense is probably one of the ones I don't put too much into. Mainly because if you have a shield, you can also block there. And also courage. Because I don't really use, except for healing, I don't really use any of my skills. Mainly just because courage really isn't too... Most of the skills I generally put my skill points into are all passive. I hate going and using the active skills because, unlike the Return of the King, the healing skill is a skill, and the Return of the King, the healing skill uses items instead, and I much prefer that because it actually makes me want to use the skills in that game. Oh yeah, by the way, those berserkers are exactly like the from the Two Towers. They behave exactly like the Two Towers. You can knock them down, and if they land on their stomach, then they're dead. If they land on their back, they're gonna come up and swipe you. That actually surprised me when I was playing this, because I haven't played this game in years. I've played up to Amenhen. I didn't start Amenhen, but I played up to that point in January. But before that, I think the last time I played this game was maybe May, June-ish, 2007. Because I specifically remember playing this game, and when I was at school, close to the very end of the school year too. So it probably would be either May, June-ish, 2007. I didn't play this game after, and I sold it to get Spore, one of the many, many victims, many, many casualties of wanting Spore. What a stupid fucking decision that was. Out of all the games I had, some of the games I went and stole to get Spore. Biggest mistake in my life when it comes to games. Final Fantasy V, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, The Third Age as well. All these are the Game Boy Advance versions. I also sold Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness. That was also a pretty stupid idea for me. But at least at that point, except for Final Fantasy V, I played all those games to death. I played, yeah, right there. That Berserker's gonna come back up. But by that point, I played all these games to death. I went and played XD at least close to 10 times at least. I played everything that was for why. Sometimes I go back and I specifically go watch the E3 2006 footage and just sit there wondering what the hell happened. Oh, damn it. I really don't trust trailers after that. Spore was by, I'm not gonna say Spore jaded me as much as I learned my lesson. I really did learn my lesson after that. Don't trust any of that kind of shit. If there's anything else that has taught me a lesson, it's Goddess on the, that fucking game that's never gonna come out of Greenlight. that's never going to come out of Greenlight. And it's just going to continue to suck. I thought it was going to be a wonderful game, originally. You know, it looked pretty good. It had potential, and I've seen that it was also relatively early in the early access, so I bought it. I wanted to see where it was going to go. And for a long time, it was unstable as fuck. I couldn't really play it for all too long without it going, bugging the fuck out. But they eventually got it to start working a bit better, but there's nothing to it. They've never really put in objectives. They never really made their big thing. And the sculpting mechanic was always just not necessarily boring, but tedious, kind of similar to Spore in Space Age, in which you have all of these actual art tools. But why the fuck would I want to use them? I have no drive to use them. And it's just tedious for nothing. Oh well. All the things that I don't even want to talk about that game. That has taught me a lesson about early access. PC. It's really something that a while back, you know, the idea that you had to, you know, patch a game kind of, I'm not going to say that it bothered me too much, but as much as I really always thought you should have a lot of play testing, and then that shouldn't really be too much of a problem. Maybe a light patch. But over the years, and especially when it comes to console games, in which PC, I'm a bit more inclined to... I'm more likely to give it a pass, because, you know, patches on PC games have always been a thing. However, holy shit, what's with all the... A lot of these games look like they haven't left early access and shit like that. All the AAA games, and that fucking sucks. Oh well, I've drifted far off from what I originally wanted to talk about. No, I did actually want to talk a little bit about the Lord of the Rings, just from the Fellowship of the Ring onwards to the Third Age. Oh yeah, by the way, this is the biggest reason why I actually think the Game Boy Advance, the music they put on the Game Boy Advance is actually pretty good for the Game Boy Advance standards, because of this. Granted, I mean, all the music's good, but that was the moment when I really realized when I was playing this a couple of days ago, holy shit, I actually like this music. And again, it's on the Game Boy Advance. And I have a similar problem with the DS. The DS, which it was better, but I never really remember any of the music I've ever played, I've ever heard on the DS. And again, it's similar to the thing I have with Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy, I remember all the music I've ever heard on those on that system. But I did want to talk about a bit more on the Lord of the Rings games between the Fellowship of the Ring and well, I could go on even past the Third Age, but I'm not going to do so. But it's all the way up and outside of the Fellowship of the Ring. And maybe tactics, depending on who you talk to. Some people I've seen don't like the game at all. Other people I've seen really, really like the game. And I'm of the sort that likes it, but it's no Third Age of the Game Boy Advance. But originally, the Fellowship of the Ring, with the... I forgot who actually made it, I don't think EA got it until the Two Towers. But the Fellowship of the Ring on the console and on the Game Boy Advance, they didn't have the rights to the movie property. They only had the rights to the film property. And holy shit! I lucked the fuck out here. I got that awesome armor. I got all that money. And I got fucking this. Holy shit. This isn't something you're supposed... A lot of the red actual items are rare. Really, really rare. You can get some shit that you are just... If you're lucky to get something like this, it's generally good. 6 to 12 damage, great. Even more if you're doing it two-handed. 5 plus Orc Slayer. That means if you're attacking orcs, and possibly Uruk-hai, but mainly the orcs and the goblins, you're going to be doing another 5 plus damage. Wonderful. Is it not? I'm not even going to think about selling. I basically... Oh, shit, kill it. Kill it, please. Oh, good, I murdered that fucker. I despise that recolor. I despise that motherfucker in Helm's Deep. Oh, the bane of my existence when it comes to this game. But oh well. The Fellowship of the Ring. When they were making that, they only had the property. They could only use anything out of the book. They couldn't use anything out of the movies. And that was, that was not all that bad. I don't know who the fuck was going and doing it, but because I haven't played that game in a long ass time, though I do own it, and I will play it eventually. But both of the games have different problems. The Fellowship of the Ring on the Game Boy Advance is difficult. It's just... I don't even know what you're supposed to be doing. It's really hard to play that game without a guide. And it's just boring. Absolutely boring. The Fellowship of the Ring on the console is far more... It's... That adventure game sucked for completely different reasons. The biggest one, it being bugged and glitched up more so. It was probably more bugged and glitched up than some of the games, some of the AAA games that come out nowadays on their first actual run. I mean, I heard tons of shit about Arkham Knight on the PC and how that port was disgustingly awful. However, I've played Fellowship of the Ring on the console, and that had so many game-breaking glitches that would force you to start over. That is... It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, they changed everything up when it went on to the Two Towers, and they kept it for the Return of the King. The Two Towers started up with the actual Game Boy Advance, instead of being a just run-of-the-mill RPG, Western RPG, though it reminded me a little bit more of a JRPG at some points. You actually had this right here, which is more of a Western RPG, action RPG sort of thing. The Two Towers on the console went into more hack and slash territory instead of being, based on levels, instead of that adventure game that they had in the Fellowship of the Ring. And I believe this was to distance itself from those games entirely. It definitely did help. I really do love these games because, again, licensed games have the tendency, definitely have the reputation for being either underwhelming and or sucking. However, I grew up with the Lord of the Rings games post Fellowship of the Ring. I grew up with games like Spider-Man 2, which was absolutely wonderful. My view on it nowadays, now I remember some of the horrible points about that game. It was a little bit different, but that was still a pretty good game. The Return of the King continued on what the Two Towers did, and tried to refine it. The Return of the King on the console brought in multiplayer. Actually, same thing on the Game Boy Advance. You can apparently do multiplayer. I've never been able to, but you can apparently do that. Not to mention, there was these, the multiplayer maps. You could just go and do them whenever you wanted to. And, you know, single player, it was pretty amazing. You could actually play as Sam in that, too. You could actually play as Samwise, which was actually quite a lot of fun. I've gone through Moria and just played as him before. But, even then, the Third Age, after all that, tried something different, in which it, you know, went for strategy on the Game Boy Advance, which worked perfectly, worked really, really well. And the actual game on the console was great as well. Oh well, see you everybody. Until next time.